All right, so today I wanted to make a video to share my perspective on why Christianity is taught in the way that it is taught. Now, the way it is taught often is not necessarily straight up biblical. A lot of things are passed down through the tradition that really aren't biblical. And I'm not here to argue what is and isn't biblical. I'm not here to argue what is and isn't right. I'm not here to proselytize and tell you that what I'm saying is what you should believe. I'm not here to knock anyone else's beliefs. I'm just here to share with you a perspective that is formed in me through my years of sincere engagement with the Bible, with the my study of learning about the history and formation of the Christian religion, and my personal relationship with God. So, there are a lot of things about Christianity that make both Christians and non Christians a little uncomfortable, or a lot uncomfortable. Things that some would even say maybe aren't good things to teach to people. And I want to talk about why some of these things may be taught. Let's start with the first one, and that is that people are sinful, and that people they inherit sin, that we're fallen because of what happened in the past from the very beginning with Adam and Eve. The notion of original sin and our fallenness and all of that makes a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. Um, if we sort of like project it onto like an infant, I think, oh, it's a sinful baby, and that baby is um, somehow uh, not going to go to heaven if it's not baptized, and all these kinds of things, right? People don't like that. They might not along with saying they agree with that because of one of the other things that people don't like, and that is the idea that fear of the Lord is the first step in the towards knowledge or towards wisdom. There are a lot of different verses in the Bible that sort of relate to some of the things that I'm saying, and some of the verses have a little bit different wording. But this idea that fear is the beginning, you better fear God. Okay, it's another thing that people feel a little bit like, if God's loving, why should I fear Him? So this goes along with another notion of the fact that, let's say that part of our fallenness and our sinfulness and all of that ties into our bodies, and that this is the flesh that we're, you know, that the whole bodily experience, in a sense, is almost just fleshliness. That pleasure is fleshliness, um, and that the body's not to be trusted. The body's like the cage of the soul. Be fearful or not, or you know, on the alert for things like lust, things like anger, jealousy, envy. And then I think maybe the last thing here, I've got a couple of notes over here. The last thing might be the idea of eternal hell, that people could go to hell forever. All of these things make people uncomfortable. All these things make Christianity, to many people, unattractive, To some, they would suggest that these suggestions themselves are somewhat pathological and not very healthy for people to receive because we can start to develop things like guilt complexes and self loathing. We could feel overly responsible for things like the death of Jesus himself. Like people, I mean, I remember in church people saying, like, we're all responsible for Jesus's death. And I remember thinking, how could I be responsible if I wasn't alive? Like, I didn't kill Jesus, I didn't contribute to that in any way. And that's a, you know, and it makes sense. But for a while, I pushed against the whole thing in a way that was just like a reaction against. And I studied some other things and other religions and sort of got a different perspective on things. And I came back to understanding Christianity in a new way and appreciated it and loved it more than ever. And now I see how a lot of Christians are treated, and not to say that a lot of Christians don't, in a sense, invite a lot of negativity in their direction because of the way they use the Bible like a weapon, like to hit people over the head with it. And they're no different, in a sense, than people trying to hit people over the head with science articles and science journals and law books. People are always trying to dominate each other. They're trying to use knowledge as a weapon. They're trying to use knowledge as a way to be better than people, to superiorize themselves. But over the years, I've started realizing that I think part of maybe the unconscious agenda of Christianity, and maybe not agendas, maybe that's not the right, the unconscious reasons for why these things are taught in the way they're taught has to do with them lining up with the developmental nature of human beings. Let me explain. We begin from a place very much where as soon as we start to have a sense of I and me, it's I, me, mine, me, mine, mine. Very selfish, very self centered, also very immediate. We don't worry about the future. Okay? Now, I believe that Christianity has to, I believe that what it does purposely, uh, and I say purposely from like almost like an evolutionary purpose, because religions are somewhat products of nature, is that it's trying to serve as kind of a parental perspective for others. It's trying to teach us first our capacities for toxicity before it gets into our capacities that we could um, be medicinal toward each other, that we could be healers, that we're holy. Because when it comes to the developmental nature of human beings, it starts with the word that we hear more than any other word when we're a little kid, and we hear it infinitely more than its opposite. We hear no, 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 don't grab that, no, don't do that, no, 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 right? Um, we also start very much from the teachings of black and white, good, bad, yes, no. And this really gets down to a very basic way in which we function. It's either I want, I don't want, approach, avoid. So when it comes to children, we would never teach them at the beginning that matches were good, that matches can help you start a fire so you can cook food and keep yourself warm. Because we know that if a child has matches and attempts to do that, that they're not gonna be able to do it. It's not gonna work out right. So we teach them first the danger. We teach them the capacity for that they have the capacity for destruction if they play with matches. And that no, that's bad. Don't play with matches. Similarly, like crossing the street. You don't teach a kid first to look both directions. You probably are going to teach them don't go to the end of the street. No, you do not go to the end of the street. That's before you teach them that they can look opposite directions. And it's definitely before you could teach them that one day they could be a crossing guard and help other kids go across the street. Okay? There's a wisdom in teaching, even though it's a partial truth, teaching that partial truth first. Okay, now follow, because this is going to go along with all these other things. Why would you teach people to be afraid of God, fear of the Lord? Why would you say that's the first step in knowledge or wisdom? Well, because you should be careful when it comes to anything in nature. You should maybe be a little mindful of it, and you should think, oh, there's a berry on a tree that's red. Maybe you don't just grab it and eat it. Maybe there should be a little fear about something even that could seem somewhat benign. That even something, even God Himself, we should first start off with a little bit of fear because it's bigger than us. We're not in control. And of course, we start off as infants and everything's bigger than us. And we are not in control. And we can't even feed ourselves or change ourselves or walk around. We are vulnerable and helpless. And we need to know that. And part of that is we want to learn how to relate. We want to learn that if we don't relate well to things, it will be painful. And that as humans, we want to be able to be a part of a bigger group. We don't want to be lone wolves. We don't want to be outside of the tribe, especially in more primitive circumstances. So we learn this idea of being afraid of God. It's like being afraid of a bear. Be afraid of an animal you don't know about. It might bite you, right? Now, and then later we learn that, like in 1 John 4:18, perfect love casts out fear. And some would think that some of these messages could be almost contradictory, but they're not, especially when you think in terms, again, of development and what lessons are more important to learn on the front end. Um, Another one would be about the body and, you know, the urges of the body, sexual impulse. A lot of people feel like Christianity is kind of derogatory, or like they demonize it demonizes sex in some ways, and has kind of a way of almost suppressing things and not honoring what is natural. The critique is that there's something to be said about that. But at the same time, I think anyone that would say that there's no danger in sexuality would just be acting, it would just be foolish. We know that people can get diseases, people can get pregnant by people that they wouldn't want to be with for the rest of their lives or want to have anything to do with raising the child that may be produced. Right? People don't want to get someone pregnant they do not want raising their kids, nor do they want to get pregnant by someone they don't want having an influence in their life, in their children's lives and their own lives, because there's a connection, there's a bond that's created, and it's not just some imaginary bond. It's not just an emotional bond. It's like literally you might have to see this person for at least the first 18 years of your child's life, if not forever. That person's going to be a big part of your life. And there's a lot of men jump off bridges because of the way the court systems work and the way they have their kids taken away from them and things like that. Um, there are a lot of people that really suffer because they had sex with the wrong people, you know, and if we were to act like there's nothing dangerous about sexuality, it would be silly. And to think that we should start by talking about how awesome sex is, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you hype something up first, people are going to embrace it, and they're gonna do it without any reservation. Um, people criticize the idea if you try to shelter people too much, or you try to demonize something too much, people will go to the very forbidden thing, and that's true as well. But it does seem to me that there's wisdom in teaching that it's better to be cautious about something first. And again, if you're appealing to the lowest common denominator, which we all come from we all go from being more ignorant to less ignorant, from being, more selfish to hopefully one day less selfish. And fewer people reach the higher levels of emotional, mental, and spiritual development, just like fewer people live to the fullness of their biological development, meaning a few things. Fewer people are going to reach the age of 100 than 30, right? That's just the way that is. Fewer people are going to fully develop what their body could turn into in terms of all the potentialities of how strong they could become, how fast or flexible, or how intelligent they could become, and all those things. So we go from less developmentally complete to more developmentally complete. So it makes sense to me that you would want to teach people first that be careful about your sexuality before you teach them that it's holy. Another thing with the body has to do with emotions. The idea that you teach people to beware and that anger is like bad before you teach them that it's just an emotion and that how we respond to anger and how we deal with it is more of the issue, that it's natural to be angry. If we couldn't get angry, it would be dangerous. It could be just as dangerous as being like overly angry, because if we don't have anger, people will cross our boundaries. People will hurt us. Anger is part of the rage system if you study neuroscience and Jaak Panksepp, and it's meant to protect us. If somebody breaks into your house in the middle of the night and goes after your kids, if you weren't angry, there'd probably be something wrong with you. So you teach people that anger could lead to murder and that that's the root of murder a lot of times, before you teach them that anger's self-protective and a good thing because it's God-given. It's instinctual and it keeps us alive. Other things like envy and jealousy. You teach people, be careful of that stuff because it can lead to all kinds of, destruction as well. But we're humans and we're going to feel envy sometimes or jealousy, especially if things aren't fair. And what do they say? Life isn't fair. And if you have ever seen that video of the two monkeys that are in cages and it's clear plastic or glass or something, and there's a researcher, and the researcher's playing like this little game with the monkeys, and or doing this little experiment where he's saying, I want you to hand me a rock, and if the monkey hands the researcher a rock, the researcher gives the monkey a cucumber. And he does this with each of the monkeys for a little while. And then he starts to give one of the monkeys a grape instead of a cucumber. And grapes are sweeter, so it's almost like being worth more money. They're more valuable to the monkey. They like them more. And the other monkey sees it happening, and that monkey's still getting cucumbers and feels slighted. So that monkey starts raging. It's so mad. It starts shaking the glass. Um, we should respect that. That's what's trying to be taught. That's in us. Be careful. But it's also, in a sense, we need to make things pretty fair, because that's natural in humans. And what would happen if we didn't have a sense of unfairness? Because sometimes envy and jealousy could kind of play into just a general feeling of unfairness. Feeling of unfairness is what keeps civilization going in many regards. Unless we're just going to have, civilizations of slavery, you know. So we learn first about the danger of jealousy and envy before we realize, okay, maybe when we feel those things, maybe there's something going on with unfairness. Maybe there's something that is legitimately unfair. Maybe not, but you get what I'm saying here. Um, and let's go to this next one here about eternal hell. People don't like the notion of eternal hell. Why would you teach people that there's an eternal hell? So, and we could say, well, we don't necessarily know because none of us have, um, we're not dead yet. We're not eternally dead or something. The way I understand eternal hell or eternal heaven is that they exist. I do think that there is an eternal heaven and eternal hell in a particular way, but that sense of eternal isn't just in um, the domain of time, internal. It's also present on Earth while we're alive. So it's not just that it's not just an afterlife concept. That's what I'm saying. It's also a this life concept. And in this life right now, some people are experiencing heavenliness and other people are experiencing hellishness. And it's like we're right between those two frequency bands that exist in this life and potentially in the next, and that we can get caught. Well, this one, the bottom one, the hell, we'd say we might almost get caught in it. And this one, wouldn't it be nice to be almost stuck in it, right? To be stuck in eternal bliss. And that's what sometimes people think of with enlightenment and those kind of concepts, nirvana, moksha, and those things can all be a little bit different. I don't mean to homogenize those, but what I'm saying is that some people right now are living hell on earth, and other people are living some heavenly stuff. And heaven and hell permeate not just the temporal realm, time, but also afterlife and present life. It's here. It's omnipresent. Heaven and hell are omnipresent, and that we could be connecting more to one or the other all the time. If we start being more grateful, we start connecting to that up there. If we start developing things that make us at more peace, we start to go up there. If we if we engage in other activities, we start pulling ourselves down. So I can understand why we might want to teach people about the dangers of something like hell, because a lot of times if we were to teach them about heaven and they get the wrong ideas, you could almost be guaranteed that their approaches to getting to heavenliness would definitely lead them to hellishness. You know that saying that um, the road, what is it? The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. You ever thought about that? What does that mean? The road to excess? It's going to take you to rock bottom, and that'll rock bottom's often where a lot of people seem to, I don't want to say have to go, but a lot of people, once they hit rock bottom, then life changes and they become wiser. Here's another one for you. You ever hear the expression all things in moderation? Makes sense, doesn't it? Now, what about this? I'm going to add a little bit more to it. All things in moderation, including excess? Are there times where we could moderately incorporate some excess in life? Are there times where we might indulge? Is there such a thing as healthy indulgence? And wouldn't you want to first start by teaching people about the dangers of indulgence before you say, well, there's sometimes you can indulge a little bit? It makes a lot of sense to me. I, uh, again, I think that we are designed to learn certain lessons first, and if we learn the other lessons, it's dangerous. An example would be teaching people that if you this thing about everybody wanting to be a healer, and like people love to identify as empaths and they're healers and this kind of stuff, and there's a lot of talk now about how that's often the talk of someone in a very narcissistic mindset, even if they're not like someone with narcissistic personality disorder. There's something somewhat narcissistic about going around maybe proclaiming too much that you're like a healer. It'd be like going around saying you're like a saint, or uh, people want to sometimes overcome their feelings of inferiority by being superior to others and having magical powers of helping people or having more intuition than others or being more empathetic, right? Um, it's the way people are. So, do we want people starting off their lives thinking they're like gods and goddesses? And what might happen if people thought like that? Like it seems like that would be definitely a recipe. It seems to me that it would be a recipe for arrogance and grandiosity and inflation, not humbleness and humility and balance. And of course, yes, you're going to teach people more to be humble, to be mild and meek, not grandiose and elevated and those kinds of things. I'm looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else I want to kind of bring in here. It's just that I think Christianity is trying to teach us first our capacities for toxicity. And if we're not honest about that, we will be toxic. And when we start to realize our capacities for toxicity, then we probably do become a little bit more medicinal in the way we interact with people. Or, we have maybe less of we harm less externality, less casting of shadow everywhere. It does seem that we also have to kind of start with duality before non-duality. Black and white, good, bad, good, evil, yes, no, approach, avoid, I want, I don't want, heaven, hell. Where as we go through our development, we start to refine the shades. We start to see there's many shades of gray or spectrum of colors. But, if you think about when you're learning your colors, you learn probably, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, uh, blue. I don't know if you really learn indigo, like maybe purple and violet, whatever it is. You don't start getting into hunter green and um, all the all the variations of each particular color. But as you grow, you learn about your colors, you start to get all the different shades down. And that's a developmental process again. To be able to at least name them, let's say to give them a label. I think there's a wisdom to the way Christianity teaches people, and I think a lot of people don't understand it. I'm not saying I'm right here, but I'm saying that to throw it out as though it's like merely pathological, tossing the baby out with the bathwater because nowadays people have access to so much critical biblical scholarship that they can hardly, unless they've been, going to church their whole lives and not really gotten on the internet, not really studied, not looked into some of the, again, biblical scholarship that's been around a lot of it for a long time at this point that shows that the Bible, isn't exactly without historical issues that might not be, things that might not be exactly historical or things that might contradict the idea of infallibility or inerrancy, however you want to split those things apart. I'm not here to do that. All I'm saying is that, you know, the more people try to push things to literalism, to biblicism, to what's called, have you ever heard of bibliolatry, where you almost like idolize the Bible, you kind of turn it into the God, which, this is a good way to end it. It's probably that you teach, don't look outside your faith, don't look outside your denomination. It's dangerous out there. Stay home. Stay home. Because there's a lot of danger out there. You don't want to go out in the world with a particular type of open mind that's not discerning, that just takes everything in. That would be very dangerous. Right? You teach children what? Strangers are what? Strangers are what? Dangerous. Not later, like you learn that the stranger might be actually almost like a put there by God to give you insight that nobody near you has. That the stranger sometimes like a divine, um, a divine uh, messenger in your life. Now, wouldn't it be wise? How about this? Wouldn't it be wise if we taught people that computers and phones, we started, hey, they're dangerous, as opposed to, here you go, just play with it? What if we taught people that, hey, alcohol's dangerous, tobacco's dangerous, Sugar's dangerous. Do you see what I'm saying here? Things start with danger, fear, could be bad. And I don't think that's an unhealthy, I think that's a, if someone were to frame that as a negativity, it would be the healthy negativity. Fear of height. Don't be careful up there. Be careful climbing up that high. Um, the parental perspective has to be the perspective of warning, of danger, it's almost a little bit of a bummer. Shrinks things down a little bit. So be careful. Be careful. And we live in a world where a lot of people are having this fear instinct manipulated, misdirection, and misdirected. We're being taught to be afraid of things that are more benign and that we don't have to be as afraid of. And we're being taught not to be afraid of things that we should have some serious reservation and concern about. And I think that if we're not able to see that, that um, we will eventually. We will eventually. So, prophets, and you think about biblical prophets, they kind of often were they were warning people, and they weren't necessarily the most positive people in the eyes of other people. Just like parents aren't positive in the eyes of children. If a child wants to play in the road and the parents saying no and saying you're going to get in trouble for this, I mean, you're no fun, mom. You're no fun, dad. But mom and dads want to make sure you live on to see the next day. And maybe the Bible's trying to help us out so we live on to see a better next life. I don't know, but that's my understanding right now of why some of these things are taught in the way they're taught. And again, much respect to anyone who disagrees, or to anyone that thinks otherwise. Um, I wish everyone the very best. Thank you for your time watching this and your attention. God bless and namaste.